Deleted Station, September 27, 1978. Now, good evening. Revelation, obedience, and objectivity. That is the heading for this evening's discussion. In the Old Testament, you did what you were told to by the Almighty. If He told you to stay your son upon a mountaintop, then it was up to you to obey, and to your son to acquiesce. God's words were not to be taken lightly. There was not to be any argument given. Obedience was man's largest responsibility to the Godhead of the Old Testament. Now, Ruber's paper was largely correct in that Christianity in general, and the Catholic Church in particular, has not only frowned on revelation, but in the past tried with the utmost effort to strike it down. This was largely out of self-interest, and the many Protestant faiths are a proof of the fragmentation that results when man is given some freedom to interpret his relationship with God Himself. That freedom, however, of course, has been highly limited in nature, for the dogma of Christianity still largely held. There were, however, other reasons also to do the Church some small justice. If God could tell a man to stay a son, and if private revelation were granted validity, then divinely inspired Christ might not only be legion, but might also take man's energies away from accepted godly pursuits, like fighting the infidels or heretics at home. You could not have a cohesive society based upon the validity of private revelation when you believed in a God who was so bloodthirsty and who demanded such proofs of obedience. Now God at the last moment might stay your hand, but then He might not. Divinely inspired Christ could only be acceptable against the enemies of organized Christendom or against its own subservience. There, of course, was a certain amount of prejudiced order maintained. The Church could not tread revelations, lest new orders might come to contradict the old ones, to upset the spiritual status quo, and hence the social organization that developed about it, or that might revive old tenets once a part of Christianity, but later dropped. Christ, as you understand Him historically to be, spoke in parables and symbols. Men often took Him literally, but His message was that the Spirit of God was within each person in terms of the symbolism, each person being a child of the Father who dwelt in heaven. But heaven meant an inner reality for Christ, not an exterior one. For centuries, priests of one kind or another have been put in charge of reading God's messages and interpreting them to the rest of mankind, just as in later times, the scientists have been put in a position of interpreting man's own word to him, in terms quite as esoteric as those of any religion. So science and the revelation seem far apart indeed. For the revelation usually insists upon obedience to a vision that is privately received, and offers as a rule but poor evidence. No questions are allowed. Science, on the other hand, constantly questions, and is so objectively occupied that the subjective world is entirely beyond its realm. The beginnings of science were apparent before its full blossoming, and in a way it is important because of its strict interpretation of objectivity, exaggerated though it may be. In the past, because of your God concepts, private revelations were indeed highly unwieldy. No common sense was applied to them. They were untinged by objectivity. They justified an act. This applied not only privately, however, but to the mass accepted revelations of all religions that could justify righteous words for God's sake, or justify murder in the name of peace. You have had a season in which reason and emotion seemed to be opposites. Revelation and reason seemed to be enemies. Yet, as the approach of the scientific age appeared before its bluntly, so new tendencies are now showing that do indeed signal a new era in which the emotions and the intellect are no longer regarded as opposing tendencies in man. Revelations will be encouraged, and yet they will not be put above the common sense wisdom that insists upon tolerance and justice. Man has indeed forgotten how to interpret his revelations, but more importantly, he has forgotten how to receive them, and then how to perfect them in reason's light. Give us a moment. Rupert's dream about the reincarnational room told him that he had decided to concentrate in each life rather exclusively upon certain issues. He decided not to be distracted even by the public or by public issues. He does not need, therefore, to have symptoms to force himself to stay at home. He does not need to fear that he will be distracted. He does not need those extra precautions. He does have the willpower to say no. The next psychic family dream represented an actual reunion of some smaller family members, so that Rupert would not feel so alone, but realize he did indeed have rich emotional connections with others at other levels, and that he was part of a family of creative initiators, full of energy and vigor, who could go out into the world or cheerfully forget it if they chose. The dream meant also that he was not alone in a different fashion, for the self that he knows is supported by strong and vigorous other portions of the psyche, and other aspects all ready to help him, inner friends he can count upon. The dream also represented the coming birth of new material, for the family members gave each other new information and bits of knowledge, so that this was also a reunion of portions of the psyche. Do you have any questions? Ross said, I guess not. I haven't taken the time to think of any. Do you? This was the first time I had ever asked Seth if he had any questions we could answer. My little tactic didn't work, though. They said, the questions come from you. Ross said, well, I guess not then. They said, then I bid you a fond good evening. And again, my congratulations on Unknown the book, and all of them do indeed have a part to play in the new era that is approaching. The new Aquarian age may be an exaggeration, and about it are grouped many distorted ideas, yet it is a popular term that stands for an insight on the part of the people, and is a result of quite valid inner knowledge that an era is ending, and that another has to some extent already begun. And of session, I bid you a fond good evening, and to a sweet creature. Ra said, okay, thank you.